Welcome back to AP World History. We're now going to take a look at the era of modern imperialism. We're going to look at this in two parts. The first part is the colonization process, and the second part will be what life was like for those that were colonized. And so, starting us off here, you might be wondering, well, why is there a second wave of imperialism and colonization going on? And the reason is pretty simple. First off, the Industrial Revolution is demanding that new markets be opened so that they can sell their products because they're overselling what they're making. And if they don't sell all their products and get rid of them, then countries tend to go into a recession and businesses tend to fail because they're not making money. And the second reason with the Industrial Revolution is that these businesses are making so much that they're running out of the resources at home and they need to secure more of those resources outside of their home. And so by going and conquering new territories, they're able to gain those resources, and they can also improve upon their technologies by having new resources come in that they didn't have available before. Along with this, we have a push for nationalism, as we saw with the French Revolution and Napoleon's subsequent conquest of Europe. It pushed Europe to really become nationalistic, and colonization becomes a way to express one's nationalism. As well, new technology came about to make colonization a heck of a lot easier. The steamboat makes it faster to travel. The new weapons that come out make them make the Europeans, who are already superior technologically to many of the people they are going to go conquer, it raises it up a few levels and makes it very, very, very difficult for anyone to put together a strong resistance against them. And the Europeans, as we've kind of seen throughout history, have a belief that they are better than anyone else, and they want to prove it, and they want to kind of take over the world. And so they try a second attempt at taking over the world. And so what happens is, first, countries will go in and looking for resources and for to see whether it's worth it or not. They'll go and explore a little bit and find whatever goods they can find, and then start to use economic controls to bring those regions into their power. So they might set up strong trade agreements and alliances through that. And if that's enough to bring them into their power, if the kings feel that's good and to be tied to that European power, then they're good. And if they can become part of the empire, and they kind of give up some sovereignty to the Europeans, but for the most part, they kind of run the country as it is. If they resist, then the Europeans will send in military action to conquer the territory. This happens a little bit more than not, but it's usually small engagements. There aren't any huge wars that come about because of this, because the Europeans have, again, superior technology. They have cannons, and by the end of this, we have the machine gun coming out. As well as early on in this, we have the Gatling gun. And so just much, much superior numbers or technology compared to the numbers that the people that will be colonized have. And along with this, as part of those economic controls and those military actions, they might befriend enemies or just set up treaties with local rulers to kind of rule over them but protect them and help them out when they need help, as long as the Europeans got the resources in the end. And so this is the main thing that happens. There are a couple really big and long wars that come out of this, like the British versus the Boers and the Zulu. But really there isn't a lot of hard fighting in this just because of the Europeans' superior technology. And the one amazing thing is the Europeans don't go after and attack each other. It came very close to the French and the British fighting each other over a couple pieces of land in Africa, but instead, when the troops met, they stopped and got orders to just hold the lines where they were, and those became the new borders between the new colonies. Now, in Asia, you can see, we'll look at this first, but Asia and China don't really get fully controlled by anyone. However, areas in China have to be given some influence by or to the Europeans. Britain's the main one in China that gets a say in there, but as well, all the other Europeans have certain ports that they're able to go to. For example, Britain's is Hong Kong, and so they have a special treaty there. Now, outside of China, you'll see India, being conquered, and almost all the territories in Asia are conquered, other than China's, again, somewhat autonomous, and Siam, which works out a treaty between the French and the British to maintain their independence. Tibet also is kind of independent at the time, although, um, yeah, there isn't really anyone going to take over Tibet in the mountains region, because one, they're tough to conquer, and two, there wasn't much to gain from them. And then Japan will eventually become their own independent group as they industrialize and will go and conquer other territories. So, Asian Pacific, in the Pacific region, you see the Dutch really will maintain control of Indonesia and strengthen that control. Britain will fully take over India now. They'll also take over Australia and New Zealand. And on New Zealand, they'll find a place called Middle Earth and find some hobbits in Hobbiton and some great things like that. They'll eventually be led by a guy named Gandalf and end the Lord of the Rings, or the War of the Rings. But yeah, they find that there. As well, in Vietnam, France conquers them, makes them their own, and this is what will lead us to the Vietnam War in the 1960s. And then in China, again, there isn't really any one specific person that controls China. The Qing dynasty will still be the rulers and governors of China. However, they lose control to European merchants in certain regions. In Africa here, you can see a map of how it gets divided up, and a lot of it is controlled by Britain, which is in the pinkish color, and then the French take the other major portions. The French really focused in West Africa due to its closeness and because of the ease of conquering the region. It's really easy to conquer the region, mostly because of the Sahara Desert, and there aren't many people there to stop you in pushing, other than maybe some sandstorms. And then the British really focused on the East Africa with the resources that are there, going down from Egypt, and we're trying to connect all the way to South Africa, but we're stopped by the Germans when the Germans took over Tanzania. And you can see some other areas. Another region that we'll really talk about and focus on here in class is the Belgian Congo, which you can see is right there in Central Africa, and will be a major issue here in the treatment of the colonized. And so I kind of already went over a lot of this, these divisions, but this really stems from the Berlin Conference, which was in 1885, and it set the ground rules for how the Europeans were going to go and take over Africa. And by 1914, 90% of Africa was controlled. The only two exceptions to this were Ethiopia, which maintained its independence by defeating the Italians, and Liberia, which was a free state because the United States had set it up as a place to send some slaves back to Africa after freedom, but also to send any slaves captured on slave ships to Africa as well. So this then leads us to the U.S. Okay, we won't talk about the U.S. too much, but the U.S. also has this going on. As you might have seen in Asia and in Africa, there isn't much U.S. involvement now. The U.S. does get involved and eventually takes over the Philippines from the Spanish in 1901 with the Spanish-American War. But for the most part, we stay out of it, and that's because we're focusing on our push westward, our manifest destiny, in which we said we are going to reach from sea to shining sea, and we also proclaimed that we were going to protect the New World from the European powers under the Monroe Doctrine, but we didn't really say that we were going to stop them from us, and so we push westward. We fight with Mexico. We first have the Texas War of Independence, that then that region or that territory gets annexed eventually into the United States, and then we go to war with Mexico again, then the United States goes to war with Mexico after that to solidify the territory and also gain new concessions, which bring in our southwestern United States. And at the same time that we're doing this, we are also pushing westward and forcing Native Americans onto reserves and taking them, or reservations, and taking them off of their ancestral lands. and almost in a process in some ways of trying to exterminate them because of the threat they are to us, and that they are not necessarily settled people, and they aren't civilized in the way Americans think they should be civilized, and even if they are civilized, they're not right. And so, although we try to proclaim that we're not imperialist, we definitely had that as part of our history here, with how we treated Mexico and our Native Americans that were west of the 13 colonies.